Hi, everyone. I'm Trent Jacobs, digital editor of the Journal of Petroleum Technology, and welcome to SPE Live. Today, we have with us Fareed Al Hashmi, the COO of Dragon Oil, talking to us from Dubai, UAE. He comes to us with more than 35 years in the business, mostly with ADNOC, and is a petroleum engineer by background. Fareed is also an active member of the SPE, but his day job involves the development and operation of the Chelekan fields offshore Turkmenistan in the Caspian Sea. Welcome to SPE Live, Fareed. How are you doing?
It's my pleasure to be here.
Well, thanks for joining us, and let me say Happy New Year. For those that don't know you, we were just talking before we went live here about a little bit about what you do, and I was wondering if you could share with us really quick about the operations that you oversee. Just before we were talking, you were saying that it was a sandstone reservoir.
That's right. We operate a field called Chelekan in offshore Turkmenistan, in the Caspian Sea to be exact. As a Dragon Oil, we entered into this basically venture in 2003, and we are the operator. And we produce close to 80 to 90,000 barrels a day offshore. And we've been in that business since beginning of 2003, and we're hoping that we will have the continuity to continue. Our job is to develop the reservoirs as well as basically building capacity. So that's one thing we do in collaboration with the local authorities. And my job as a chief operating officer, I look after the development of the reservoirs as well as the operations to make sure that we are sustaining production and maintaining the reservoirs as per the best reservoir engineering practices.
Well, I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. 2020 was an astonishing year in the history of the world, and doubly so for many people working in the oil and gas business. I don't need to go over the highlight reel for everybody, but as we begin this new year, I was wondering if you can share, your personal outlook of where we go from here. What does your 3 decades plus in this business tell you about the next chapter of where we're going?
I think it was an exceptionally difficult year for everybody, 2020. But looking forward, we can see it already that it will take not too long to get back into basically business again. And one indication, of course, is the need for the oil that the world is basically thriving. And we have seen that very quick recovery of the oil prices. And today we're looking at 55 plus, and the forecast looks quite impressive. What actually gives me this confidence is the level of collaborations that we have seen among the oil producing countries, not only OPEC, but also non-OPEC, the so-called OPEC plus. And we can see that more than ever before, they have come together in terms of making sure that the oil prices will go up so that people will be more interested to invest in this particular sector.
Do you think that, looking back on where we were in March and April, and we're looking at $50 WTI prices, I'm not sure where Brent is right now, but it's been bouncing around in the 55 region, and those coordinated actions that you talked about. I mean, do you think that anybody could have been this optimistic that we'd be, this close, this back up to almost where we were in January of last year before the pandemic really took hold?
I think there has been a combination of few things. The fact that the vaccines started rolling out, it gave a confidence to a lot of basically companies, and the market in general. The economy started rolling out, despite the fact that we see some difficulties faced in the North America, especially in the States, in terms of pandemic as well as Europe. But the advent of the vaccine will help a lot. And we can see that the first countries that started coming back were the Far East, where today we see countries like China, Japan, Korea, their consumption or their basically utilization of the crude oil is back to pre-pandemic level. So with that in mind, I believe the future looks promising. And as you rightly mentioned, the January production already is back into what actually it was in December 2019. So we can see or actually December 2020 production matches exactly what we did a year ago. And that by itself is a very promising sign that the oil and gas industry is coming back.
Now, Fareed, I'm not going to ask you to do the impossible and predict where oil prices are going from here.
Yeah.
There's another side of this story that gets less attention. We're very focused on sort of where the prices are today and where they might be next month. But there's been a cycle of divestment, not just in North America, which has captured a lot of headlines, but all over the world, offshore in particular, which is your home right now. And so as you're looking out a little bit further, what would you tell people watching, especially the petrotechnical community here? What does this cycle of divestment mean as we see possibly an economic recovery? Do prices, is it good? Can you fill that gap quickly, or is this a years-long process of work, catch-up work?
Well, unfortunately, because of the pandemic, a lot of projects were actually kept on hold or shelved, or some of them canceled. And that's the biggest concern that we see today. And perhaps one of the reasons that the oil prices are actually picking up faster than expected is maybe for the lack of the investment that we have seen in the oil and gas industry. And the only way to be able to get back to normal is to have healthy oil prices. But of course, the divestment that has taken place, it has not been a small one, and it will take for a while. And that's why predictions are that till capacities are built, till some downstream as well as mostly field developments are actually put in place, it will take a while to see that the world will be able to stabilize in terms of availability of the investment. And that's the topic that we hope we will be addressing very effectively during the conference. Yeah.
Well, and before we get to, I think you're talking about ATCE. Before we get to that, I had one more, sort of petrotechnical question here. And before the pandemic, this industry was undergoing a lot of change. I mean, it certainly felt like that to me as somebody who goes to these conferences, whose job it is to talk to folks like you. And there was a lot on the to-do list because we were looking at digital transformation, and then last year, 2019 as well, was dominated by the ESG changes. And so, how does the new environment that we're in today affect those, specifically those two initiatives that seem to be crossing the entire world in terms of the industry?
In terms of digitalization, of course, it has always existed, but there was a big emphasis on it during last year, and we saw it. And I'll be frank with you. Today, even, for instance, as far as we are concerned, there are some still difficulties in terms of transportation, in terms of basically crossing the boundaries, because the pandemic is still not clear. So we have realized that the only way to keep ahead of the game to basically focus on digitalization, and we have gone through some investment, particularly ourselves, in terms of making sure that while we will not be physically available, at least we will be getting basically all the information and the technical data that we need from the fields that we operate. So there is a lot of emphasis on the digitalization, and it is basically bound to, it showed its importance actually during 2020, that if you were not digitalized, then you were at a disadvantage, and that will hopefully be more emphasized from now on. Yeah.
And as far as the ESG movement that has sort of swept the industry over the years, do you see that as surviving this downturn, surviving the effects of the pandemic, and really continuing to shape the industry's future?
I think it will survive definitely, and the pandemic basically, although it was a global pandemic, but definitely ESG will be able to pull through it. So it will go without saying. I'm sure they will survive.
Well, I'm sure this will be a topic at the next thing we're going to talk about. So I wanted to switch gears and look forward to something that is on everybody's mind who's in the SPE, all the members, and that's ATCE 2021. And this is, of course, the annual technology conference and exhibition, which is returning to Dubai for the second time in 5 years this September. This is one of my personal favorite shows. I think a lot of people that have been to this one. It moves around the world, but this is a very special event where I see a lot of the best papers of the year presented. So what are you telling petrotechnicals that they can expect from ATCE in Dubai?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we want to make sure that this is a very special ATCE event. And the reason, because it basically comes right after the difficult historical year, 2020. And that's why the theme of the conference for the upcoming ATCE in 2021, we called it the New Oil and Gas Journey. And basically, we want to focus on the agility, the innovation, and the value chain or creation that was actually emphasized throughout this difficult period. So that's why it is for us, it's a showcase to be able to relaunch the petroleum engineering and oil and gas industry through ATCE. And I hope that like 2016, Dubai will be a destination whereby the confidence into oil and gas industry will be relaunched through this ATCE event in Dubai. Because quite honestly, although every sector globally were affected, and of course we as oil and gas industry, we took a big hit, but we are coming back. And this time we're coming back with the experience of this pandemic. It will be a very special conference, and hopefully there will be a lot of amazing topics to be discussed, and that will be something that we look forward to present it to the oil and gas industry and the world.
You mentioned it earlier. We're seeing something historic with the vaccines being rolled out. Barely a year after a novel virus spread throughout the world. This is something that's never been done before. So we're all really looking forward to getting back to in-person events. And I just wanted to ask you, on a personal note, what does knowledge sharing mean to you? These events are very special. This is where people from different companies are coming to essentially educate each other, ask questions in an open forum, and it's something that I take great pride in participating in. But I'm curious how important you see knowledge sharing to this industry's century-long plus existence.
It is very important, and that's the success of SPE. And I think SPE's mission is simply to share knowledge, to share experiences. And we make sure, not only through ATCE events, but all the workshops, all the basically regional sections that we have, conferences that we have, that's one thing that we emphasize, that there are no barriers, there are no basically limitations in sharing knowledge. And especially in a region like Middle East, whereby most of the reservoirs are more or less basically of the same type and same nature. So it's the experience that's seen in UAE, in Saudi Arabia, in Kuwait can equally be utilized in other parts of the Middle East. So knowledge sharing is number one. And of course, this collaboration is global, and we have always enjoyed by attending such conferences through SPE. And to be honest with you, other organizations as well, whereby the field cases, the experiences have been shared equally among all the professionals. And I'm looking very much forward to it, that Dubai will be another showcase in terms of knowledge sharing.
Yeah, one thing that's been interesting for me over the years is, if you go long enough and you attend enough sessions, you can start to see a time lapse in your head of how things are progressing. And what's been really interesting to me is watch the transfer of knowledge from North America to Asia to Middle East on unconventionals in particular. And now we're seeing a lot of interesting developments come out of your region, UAE, and the northern part of Saudi. And what I tell people is what's so interesting to watch about this process is that it's not copy and paste, and it shouldn't be, but you're watching an evolution. And so what's going to work for unconventionals in the UAE will be merely a flavor of what worked in West Texas. But that knowledge, they'll be standing on top of each other, and there'll be bits and pieces that can transfer. And but it really takes people digging in to find out, because otherwise, if you do copy and paste, you get poor results. So it's a really interesting system to watch, and it's all humans, putting their minds together.
That's right. Yeah, but sometimes it is about technology itself. For instance, we look at the unconventional development, where Texas took the lead on this one. And, unconventional is available almost in every producing country. So this is an area that we want to learn from basically our friends in North America and how they do it, and then not blindly, but of course design it for the fields that are existing in Middle East and implement that. It's not easy, but definitely this is something that we have to learn from each other. And one good example is the development of unconventional reservoirs in Middle East. That has taken off actually. Yeah.
Well, and one more thing, I have this since you brought it up. The UAE has really become a hotbed of technology lately, and I'm just curious. With the show coming back to Dubai, could you tell me how that highlights what's going on in the UAE regarding oil and gas technology these days?
Well, of course, the focus is in basically ADNOC has started leading the technology trend, and to do this, they have actually invited a lot of basically companies to come and set up their facilities in Abu Dhabi or in UAE in general. And we, as being based in Dubai, we try to take advantage of this opportunity. So you see more and more facilities are actually being created. Something recently has been developed that it is referred to as in-country value, whereby companies are encouraged to come and set up their factories, their manufacturing, their research centers in the UAE, so that it will bring a lot of benefits, not only for the region, but of course, in particular for the UAE. And that's how we see the difference, that over the past 10 years, technology related activities are actually increasing in UAE, and there are many examples to be mentioned, and there are so many areas that actually, Middle East in particular, countries like the GCC are actually pioneering. And one of the areas that we have also recently embarked on, both in Dragon Oil and I'm sure in ADNOC as well, and some of the sister companies in the region like Aramco, are actually the artificial intelligence, the use of artificial intelligence in the way we manage the reservoirs or even develop the reservoirs. That's an area that will be gaining more momentum as more and more this technique is being understood and applied.
Well, I think you gave everybody a few great reasons to try to get to Dubai in September. But and this brings me to maybe my last question for you as program chair of ATCE. Every great technical program is of course dependent on the technical community to participate. And so with this show coming up later this year, how can your colleagues around the world help make that happen? I understand that the call for papers, there's a deadline coming up.
That's right. Everyone has to appreciate that this particular event for ATCE is coming after a difficult year. And it was a year that for the first time we saw ATCE being done virtually. So, and that was a great experience by itself. But the impact of the pandemic, the ongoing pandemic, cannot be measured right now, because a lot of people definitely, there are still could have some thoughts that it may be difficult to travel and get to different part of the world. So I may not be able to, travel. So why should I submit a paper if I'm not able to attend? We hope and we basically pray that with the distribution of this vaccination, more and more countries will be in a position to ease traveling, and that by itself will basically ease attendance at the ATCE. Call for paper is expected to be closed before end of January, to be exact on 28th of January. So that means we're looking at less than 2 weeks, it will be closed in about 2 weeks, if not less than 3 weeks. And quite honestly, we always anticipate the last weeks, the last 10 days of the deadline, there will be a good number of submissions. But owing to the fact that we are coming, I cannot even say coming out of this pandemic, we are now still in the pandemic, and we are basically seeing a lot of positive signs coming out of this. We will consider, the SPE will consider, hopefully extending the deadline, and hopefully it will allow more chance for the people to submit their abstracts. And our goal is that it will be a record submission, but we have to be realistic with all the difficulties that we have seen, and kind of a hesitation that perhaps exists among the professionals to submit papers. And that's something that I ask my colleagues, professionals who are actually not only part of this ATCE, but also helping ATCE with all the programs and everything, to voluntarily to simply advertise and encourage their colleagues in their companies, in all the service companies that they deal with, and other organizations, and promote this ATCE 2021 in Dubai. And it is going to be a great help, because we hope that after the virtual ATCE, the one in Dubai, it will bring with it a lot of good news, and there will be a good participation and turnout of the people, because that's something that is missed. You talked about knowledge sharing, and knowledge sharing is at its best when basically you have face-to-face encounter, when people see each other and not only attend the conference, the sessions, the talks, but also at the same time have a chance to get into dialogue and simply exchange knowledge. Yeah.
Okay, people, well, you heard them. Bring your ideas. We know they're out there. In my talks, I know that people have been coming up with all sorts of ideas while they've been locked down, and they've had their heads down working and coming up with great stuff. And we do know that downturns change this industry and bring innovation in a way that nothing else could. It's sad, but it's true. And so we're going to see that again. Well, Fareed, I really thank you for sharing your time and your thoughts with us. And I really hope to see you in person myself at ATCE, along with everybody else who can make it there. And I hope for everybody watching that you stay safe. Do not forget to keep following SPE on social media so that you know when the next SPE live event is coming your way. And don't forget to check out JPT to keep on top of all the interesting upstream technology developments. So Fareed, thank you so much. This was fun.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure. I just wanted to highlight one last thing. Having learned from the difficult year, we know that a lot of good companies, they managed to strategize their approach during this pandemic. And this will be one of the panel sessions that we have selected, that it will address simply post-pandemic business and the strategies that have been adopted by some of the well-known companies around the world. Also, you mentioned about the issue of funding and how much basically investment would be required. That by itself is another big panel discussion that has been identified as a panel session during the next ATCE. So as you have rightly mentioned, we look forward to seeing everyone. Dubai is the destination. It happens that 2021 is the year of the Expo Dubai, which will happen immediately after the basically ATCE. So that's another golden opportunity for all the professionals to come to Dubai, attend the ATCE, and at the same time enjoy the Expo 2021.
Well, it's a wonderful place, one of my favorite cities in the world. And like I said, I can't wait to be there. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And with that, we will let you go back and get to work.